At Direct Service Garage Doors, we are your one-stop shop for all things garage door. From garage door repair and broken spring replacement to new garage doors and openers, we do it all. We're proud to be among the highest-rated local garage door companies in all of Central Arkansas. Our highly trained technicians are available 24 hours a day at no extra cost to you. So if you have an emergency, call us today, 501-244-3667, or visit our website at directserviceoverhead.com. Don't wait days. We'll fix it now.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Hogville Net YouTube. Let me get this all situated. There we go. Now it's looking. The names are going to have to be figured out. I don't know. StreamYard does not always want to work with me on some of this stuff. We've got a basketball update for you guys. Kevin McPherson's alongside us today, or alongside me. He's gonna get us filled in. We got a lot of basketball to talk. Of course, tomorrow, Otis, Kirk, and I will be live on here tomorrow, same time, actually, 11 o'clock. So you guys make sure that you're here for that. And of course, for your latest content from Hogville, you can go to hogville.net, completely free. And yeah, and of course, there's an open message board. There's no fee or anything like that, and you can read all these articles from Kevin McPherson, who's helping us out with football, but also does the basketball, and of course, Dudley Dawson and Otis Kirk, who concentrate on a little bit of everything, but definitely this time of year, it's mostly football. Kevin, how are you doing, my friend?
Good morning, Ty. How are you, sir?
Doing all right. These dadgum names, I'm telling you, this has been an ongoing process with these names. Also, to chat, if you guys have any questions, feel free, fire them our way. We like to interact with the community and with live chat. There's a lot. We've had a lot happen. We've had our first official off-season practice, if I'm correct, Kevin, this last Monday, and I wanted to get started there. Am I reading that right? That was the first official off-season practice?
Well, it's actually the first official in-season practice. So you have limited practices in the off season, which is really, they move on to campus usually the end of that Memorial Day weekend, late May, early June, and then they get their physicals, they start limited practices, summer school starts, they enroll in that. So you have multiple months of limited practices, which is 4 hours per week on court instruction. I think they get the same amount of time per week for the weight room, conditioning and strength work. And then when the season's actually officially beginning, even though they won't play games until November 9th, they ramp up practice time. So that's what we saw is actually the start of the 2022-23 season, which allows full practice according to the NCAA. Now, because they had the foreign exhibition tour, over the summer, that's extra. You get to do that once every 4 years. You got the 4 games overseas, 2 in Spain, then they wrapped up with 2 in Italy, went 4-0. We talked a lot about it, but they got 10 full practices as a lead up to that trip. The NCAA allows full practices when you take those trips, and you get 10 of them. So it's been a little bit different this time around because you had limited practices, 4 hours a week for about 2 months, June and most of July. Then you ramped up with those extra full practices for the trip. And then when they got back, they were off a few days when they returned home in mid-August. And then they got back to the limited practices. So now it escalates back, which, by the way, I'm sure Musman would have liked to have continued to be full go when he got back from the trip in many aspects. But I think also when it's going to be a long grind, right? The season's a grind, and they have a lot of away from home trips coming up when we're talking about Maui. That's outside the continental U.S. again in November. They're going to be on the road a lot away from home. We're going to talk about this exhibition game against Texas later next month that was announced yesterday. But I think having that limited practice time for a few more weeks when they got back was probably good to get fresh again, to not burn out. Sometimes, I know Musman, we're going to talk about what he talked about at the press conference on Monday before we saw practice. Usually it's the other way around, practice then presser. It was reversed. So we're going to talk about his talking points from that. There was a one theme that really came out, and we're going to talk about it. But I think if you asked him, there's pro and con to dialing back down. But I think one of the pros is fresh legs, no burnout, and now you hit it hard. And it is the first official practice of the 2022-23 season.
So talking about that exhibition game, we can just go ahead and start there, actually. That was announced, like you said, yesterday or September 27th. Yeah, yesterday. They're going to take on Texas. This is exciting. I don't know how I'm sure you're excited about it, but this is a pretty big deal, I think, for Arkansas to get yet another one of these exhibition games.
Yeah, so, really, typically what you've seen over the years are teams hosting Division II schools. Arkansas kind of you get two of them. The summer stuff doesn't count. That doesn't count toward this. You always get two. And what you've seen Arkansas do traditionally is play like a D2 school in the last, couple of decades. Before that, back in the day under Eddie Sutton, they played the Soviet national team, and they played some of these pro, semi-pro groups, older guys. But really, for a couple of decades now, you've really seen it really focused on D2 type of schools. Musselman changed that trend. They hosted Arkansas Little Rock, a Division I school in state, in his first season for an exhibition game. You saw him playing exhibition games, in Barnhill Arena, shifting some of that. So he changed that part of the exhibition part. Well, at least the red-white game. That's not an exhibition game, but it's a glorified scrimmage. So you've seen him change some things in the pre-regular season. You also saw Arkansas host North Texas for an exhibition game, and a really, really good mid-major program. And so they're not just picking on D2s. Well, now this is the next step is going on the road for an exhibition game. I can't remember the last time the program did that. I need to look that up, but I'll tell you, Texas is opening up its new arena, 15,000 seat venue. I'm sure it's going to be, the way Texas does things, I'm sure it's going to be, they'll think it's the eighth wonder of the world and belongs in an art gallery somewhere. Turn it into an art gallery. But that's where Arkansas is going to have an exhibition game on October 29th. Its tip-off is scheduled for 3 p.m. as of now. It's for charity. It's supposed to be televised on the Longhorn Network. Texas is so proud it has its own network. It's affiliated with ESPN and I think Learfield Communications, but Texas has its own network. I think it's been about a decade or so since they came up with that. But we're talking about an exhibition game. We talked about exhibition games overseas. We're going to be talking because anytime the Hogs and the Horns are hooking up, the Razorback fan base, it's just different, man. There's a different level of shark smelling chum in the water. I tweeted that yesterday. It just means more, even though Arkansas has been in the SEC for so long and there's some hated teams in the league for Arkansas fans. I don't think any, especially for older fans who were around in the old Southwest Conference days, no one replaces Texas on the most hated list, the most wanted list. So even in an exhibition game for charity, this will draw a lot of attention, and then nationally it will because of the respect levels of the program under Musselman at Arkansas, and then Chris Beard, who's still getting things going at Texas, and what he did at Texas Tech. There's going to be a lot of clamor for this game, even though it's exhibition time.
This is coming straight from ArkansasRazorbacks.com. They're talking about this matchup. This season is the 100th basketball season for the Arkansas Razorbacks, and the Arkansas-Texas rivalry dates back to the Hogs' first season of basketball in 1923 and the 1924 season. Arkansas leads the all-time series versus the Longhorns 87-68, but trail Texas 43-27 in games played in Austin. This obviously won't count towards that.
Yeah, it won't count towards the record. Arkansas had so much frustration over the years when you look at the football series. Had some big wins, but there was a national title left on the floor on the table in '69, and some other similar fates. That's the most famous. Yeah. But in basketball, Arkansas's owned that series for the most part. I mean, Texas had some success. People sleep on Texas basketball history. They've had some really good teams. They just haven't won a national championship and fared quite as well in postseason play. Yeah. Relative to some of the players and talent it's had. I mean, you can go to Kevin Durant and go all the way back with just great players. But, anytime Arkansas and Texas, it could be a made up sport, and Arkansas fans their ears are going to be tuned. They're going to perk up and they're in. They want Arkansas to win that one if nothing else. And so again, exhibition. But I'm really, going back to Monday. I really want to focus a lot today on that practice. We only got a 30-minute window, and what was said in the press conference, because it wasn't just Musselman, Ricky Council IV, Trevon Brazile.
Yeah.
A couple of veterans in the college game. Not, Brazil's still a young player, just a freshman last year at Missouri before transferring. Council with 2 years at Wichita State before transferring. But we got those guys in the interview room. So a lot to go over there. And, they didn't talk about schedule other than making a joke. They're still working on it. We got the news a day later, so that's, something that we didn't really get to talk about, as we're assuming we'll have another press conference at some point. We know most of the games already. I think there's one still outstanding, but the university hasn't officially acknowledged several of the non-conference games that we've just gotten through leaks and other teams putting out their own schedules, and Arkansas happens to be on it. So, we'll put that aside for a minute and then talk about that later in this segment, because I do want to go over some of the matchups after we talk about some of the dynamics on the team.
Going back to this exhibition talk really quick, and this is also from their website, from ArkansasRazorbacks.com. Overall, Arkansas has won 34 consecutive exhibition games and is 74-9 all time in exhibition games. That sounds like that. I mean, that's the way it probably should be for Arkansas when you consider some of their past exhibition games. But this one obviously is going to be a lot different.
Arkansas trailed by double digits last year against a Division II school in exhibition play.
Sure did.
And had to come back and scrap out a win. I mean, that game could have gone either way in the closing minutes. It was East Central out of Oklahoma, the D2 school, just not far away. And you expect the record to be that good, against exhibition opponents when you're hosting schools on lower levels of college basketball. So, again, Texas, that'll be something different. Win or lose, you're playing away from home. You're playing another high major. Both programs, would like to think they're having momentum. They're having recruiting success. So, again, even though it's exhibition, it won't count. It'll probably have some impact not only on what Arkansas fans think of their team, that's a given, but also some of the national folks when we're talking preseason rankings and what they think about these teams going into the season. And I know Eric Musselman's had a lot of talking points on Monday about where he thinks his team is, and you always wonder, how coaches, I think Musselman uses press opportunities to maybe communicate to his players as much as he is to the fans and to the media, so that he's signaling to them in a different way that becomes public, some things that he'd like to see improved on. And so I always find that interesting, because no matter what was talked about on Monday, the Razorbacks, if we were asking about the basketball team's defense or offense or some phase of the game, Musselman would start out talking a little bit about that and would always kind of trend, and he would shift gears to the youth and how getting so many newcomers and so many young players, 6 freshmen. Trevon Brazile, we mentioned it, was a freshman last year at Missouri, still a young college player. Sort of talking about getting everybody on the same page and having to be repetitious with some of the teaching and communication. And, while we were there in the 30-minute window, he was imploring, barking at the players constantly, stopping action and saying, I need you to talk. I need you to laugh. If you even have a question that you're not talking enough, talk some more. So he's really trying to, as much as, go through the fundamentals of the game, a lot of it becomes about execution. The execution becomes about how you communicate. How are guys, because if you have one assignment breakdown and 4 other guys are doing what they're supposed to do, it might be a disaster. And so you've got to, he's got to find ways to get through. And I honestly think, since he talked so much about the youth, no matter what the subject matter was on Monday, I think it swerved back to that inexperience throughout the roster. And I think he's sending messages to all of us, including his own team.
So talking about the youth on the roster, he did have a little bit to say on that. He says, and this is quoting from your article on Hogville. By the way, you guys can go read that on hogville.net, completely free. But he says, I've got to have a little more patience with this group, maybe more than some other groups. So that's clearly something you've already kind of talked about a little bit here. But you've been around it for a minute. You've seen it. Do you feel like maybe he's a little more patient, what little you've seen so far with this group, than maybe compared to some other groups, or is it just really more of the same?
Well, he's probably, you know, hitting the brakes on himself in ways that we won't know because we're not in there every day. I know that he talked at this press conference about a lot of his assistants and their patience level being much better than his, and the conversations with his wife about trying to remember. And I think what makes this group different, you brought in, he made the choice to rotate 11 new players in.
Yeah.
In the past, we thought that, you know, turning over half your roster, 6, 7 players, maybe 8, and that's what he's done since being at Arkansas the last couple of years, was a lot, right? There's challenges there, and we saw those challenges no matter how good your coach is, and the ability to teach your terminology in your system. It took Arkansas to mid-January, already hitting rough spots, and they didn't look cohesive. They didn't look like they were necessarily gelling, or not great chemistry, and he had to tweak rotations and find ways to get it to work. And once it did, it worked beautifully. But the point is, that was with half the roster or so turned over. Now you're talking 11, and among that, 6 freshmen. That's unheard of for this guy. This guy likes getting veteran players out of the portal. He did some of that, but if you go back in years past, even in the portal, a lot of guys that were going to be senior or senior grads, they didn't get one of those. Now, they did get a few guys that have 3 years college experience, and so far, the guys that he got that have that much experience haven't even factored in, when you go back and look at Europe, into that 8 rotation of guys that got big minutes. And so the folks that did get the minutes over there and might project for that, you know, top 6, 7, 8 rotation, they're all younger players. So I can understand for him, this is very much different than what he's experienced at the college level, because he hasn't reloaded with so many players before, and he hasn't had as much youth as part of whatever reloading he's done, which is usually significant. Again, half or so of the roster, now almost all of it. You know, Devo Davis and Kamani Johnson, I think, you know, help. Devo Davis was vocal during a segment of the 30-minute window we saw during drill work, telling teammates what they needed to do when Musselman stopped the action. Other assistants were being vocal. Musselman was certainly vocal. But again, you know, the fact that he keeps talking about the youth movement is why we're spending so much time on it early in this segment, because it's what stood out to me. Because everything that we tried to bring up, you know, trying to get a little insight in specific phases of the game, it kind of turned back to that youth talk. And so he's driving a point of he's still not seeing what he wants to see. And obviously he has an advantage of having those extra games, because it probably gives him even a more clear picture of what needs to be tweaked and improved upon. And I do think now he relishes the fact that the hours spent in the gym each week have picked up significantly, because I think he'll now expect to see not as much gradual improvement in grasping, but maybe that gets expedited and gets on a fast track as well. And I'm sure we'll get little nuggets about what he's seeing, because he usually doesn't hold back a whole lot. You know, you can tell what he's thinking, you know, because he tells you what he's thinking for the most part, the next time we get to see him.
Mike and them says, I saw that you got to see the 5-on-5 during practice. How did that look? What were your takeaways?
No 5-on-5.
I didn't think there was a 5-on-5.
I
was thinking about that.
Now, remember, we only got 30 minutes. They probably went 2 hours. And, you know, I found out later, you know, Nick Smith Jr., by the way, everybody was wondering about this knee brace. We knew that he tweaked his knee in the final game against the Bakken Bears over in Europe. Yep. You know, missed half the second quarter and didn't return in the game that game, just precautionary. Had a little knee brace on. But to answer the question, later in practice, they might have gone 5-on-5 because it got back to me. He had a really good practice. In the 30-minute window that media got, you really couldn't tell who was having a good practice or a bad practice necessarily, because when you're doing 5-on-0 or getting light defensive presence from some GAs and the walk-ons with boxing mitts, just kind of giving you minimal contact, the plays always result in a made bucket, either a dunk, a layup. You know, you're shooting wide open three. So everybody looked good. But there wasn't 5-on-5. They don't do a whole lot of that. Ty, I asked Musselman in the press conference about it, just to see if maybe they would do more of it, given some of the hurdles he's talking about. And he said it's really dictated by the players. He goes, when they go to live, they may spend a little bit of time on it and go back to drills based on if the players are executing and you know, carrying out the instruction. And so that makes sense to me. But they don't do a lot of it anyway. And so I think, even the players during their interview session talked about the fact that when they went overseas and played actual teams, they hadn't done a lot of live against each other. And so they felt like some of their, problem areas as far as execution might have had something to do with just being rusty, going in real live 5-on-5 type of action, consistently. That's not a knock against the way Musselman does things. It's just a fact of not going through those battles day to day. And now all of a sudden you are. But obviously Musselman, we're not going to second guess the way he does things. I'm certainly not, because we see the results, and we've seen him 2 years in a row, and he's been in his first 3 seasons. And so, how many coaches out there would like to say I've been to back-to-back Elite Eights, period, in their careers, let alone 2 years in their first 3 at their latest stop. And so, but I do think, when we talk about 5-on-5, we really only saw that. Media got 2 open media windows during July when we got to go in. That first practice we got to go to, we saw 5-on-5. We haven't really seen it since. But some of the drill work is spectacular. I mean, you get a lot from that too, because you really see how quickly the expectation is. Like on the offensive drills, crisp passes, minimal dribbling. Every step, every level that you move up in basketball, less is more in terms of pounding the rock, especially in the way the game's played now. You want the ball to move via the pass, and guys cutting, setting screens, releasing off screens, getting to their spots, keeping the spacing right. And so you see a real strict attention to that kind of detail in practice. It goes fast. And if you take an extra step or an extra dribble, you're hearing about it. And you see the players really locked in. I don't care how young they were. That was one thing that impressed me. Even the freshmen seem to be absolutely locked in. I don't think they have a choice, but it's good to see them doing their part, because I thought all players, all hands on deck, the veterans, the freshmen, but it looked like in some of the defensive drills and some of the defensive movement, you see guys moving. Timing is so important. Communication is so important. And you see some of that stuff that looked a little cleaner than it did back in July when we were in there. So that's one thing that did stand out to me in terms of players, maybe progressing a little bit.
He talked about, or he was asked about 3-point shooting. Arkansas shot, what was it, 29% in Europe, not real good. But
you're being generous, Ty.
Yeah.
You're close.
Is that high? Is that too high?
Just a little bit. It was in that wheelhouse.
I thought it was about 28%, which still isn't very good when you consider
it's right there. I was being silly because even if it was that good, it wasn't good, right? I mean, anytime you're below 30, it's not good at all.
Yeah.
And he, since they've been in the limited practice since they got back, the word that kept coming back to me was they're struggling making threes in 5-on-0. Just basically nobody, that's nobody defending you. So basically continuing a trend from what we saw when you were guarded, and now you're not being guarded and you're still struggling with that. And we know last year's team did. This is mostly a different group, so we don't want to hang the some absolute that this team will not be a good 3-point shooting team, but it may not be. It may not be. And last year's recipe, obviously every Musselman team, it starts with defense on that end. Offense, it was blue collar, right?
Yeah.
Slash into the basket, getting to the free throw line, finding ways to get buckets, driving, kind of hit and miss with transition scoring last year, I thought. And I thought the ball handling at times was problematic for Arkansas last year. We saw ball handling issues this year also in Europe to kind of piggyback on that 3-point shooting. I mean, I say kind of 3 of the 4 games, 20 or more turnovers. The final game, 30. They had a 30 giveaway coupon. But I think a lot of that guys were telegraphing passes. They got so used to attacking the rim and the basket, and it seemed like they had their way when they got to the rim. And I think they felt like even by game 3 and 4, they just still, to me, were telegraphing passes. It was obvious they weren't going to pass it back out to shoot very many threes. And so I thought some of those older defensive players kind of sat back and waited for that telegraph pass and gobble it up and go the other way. Some of it was just guys being out of sync, and that's expected again with that many newcomers. That's only going to be an excuse for so long for fans. But right now it's a valid one. But going back to the 3-point shooting, Ty, we talked about it in the press conference, and we asked about it. And the players, before we got Musselman, Brazil and Council said aside from themselves, and we expect them to give support to Nick Smith. By the way, Nick Smith Jr. shot the ball well from three and in volume overseas. That was not an issue. And I don't think it's going to be an issue. This guy's a special talent. I talk about him as a 5-level scorer, not just 3. But they mentioned, aside from Nick and themselves, they thought a guy like Jordan Walsh might be able to help him from 3. And he's a guy that's been streaky from there, but he does have the ability to knock him down. He only hit 1 in Europe. He didn't take a lot. And it was a big one, though. He hit a corner 3 at the end of a shot clock, and the other team was on a run, and it was a big shot during that run when the team went to zone. He actually battled for an offensive rebound, didn't have a good angle to go back up, backed it out. Clock was running down. He knocked it down, man. So we'll see if Walsh is another guy that can help him. But if we're using Europe at all, and you got to be careful with it, is using it as sort of a precursor. But if we're using it at all, Arkansas didn't attempt a lot of threes. They stuck with what worked. They didn't look comfortable. A lot of guys passed up threes to drive. So I don't know where the comfort level shifts for some guys to go ahead and make the defense understand we can do this too. Or if you know, well, we're going to miss and our percentages go up the closer we get, we may see more of what we saw last year. Sometimes Arkansas put up a few some games too many threes or too many threes maybe in the first half. And then at halftime, they would make that adjustment. Second half, not as many attempts, and they would attack, feed their strengths. This is where this team's going to be strong. Transition offense, I think it's going to be the best transition offensive team Musselman's had. I think, again, getting to the free throw line, we didn't see it in Europe, but the officiating in FIBA was so different. I'm gonna sound like a homer, but I really think they kind of swallow the whistles because Arkansas consistently has been elite in the college game. Getting to the line, we're talking volume. Cashing in, now we're talking efficiency. Been among the best. Last season, number 1 in attempts and makes in college basketball. And so that was, to me, an outlier. But that's going to be part of the strength, is continue to attack, get in close. You went out and recruited length, size, athleticism, guys that can slash, guys who can finish above the rim. And then you've got 2 terrific playmakers in Anthony Black and Nick Smith Jr., who can set guys up. And so now you've got the makings of a team that needs to attack. I thought they did a great job of that in Europe. Let's see if they carry that over. But getting to the free throw line, that blue-collar stuff, obviously getting offensive rebounds and stickbacks. If you can't shoot the 3, you better be really good on defense the way the game's played now, and then just manufacture points. And if you have it easier in transition and playing around the basket, you don't want to fall in love with that three-point shot and just put them up just to be putting them up. So there's going to be a balance there, Ty.
Speaking of defense, Muss also talking about the three-point stuff says, quote, hopefully teams don't defend like we do, which will also help because of the way we defend threes. If teams zone us, I actually think we'll be a better three-point shooting team.
And teams probably will. That depends on, I guess, system philosophies, but that teams that aren't afraid to play zone probably will against Arkansas because they're going to try to protect that back line and not have Arkansas beating them with lobs and just, making it less easy for slashes to the basket and dare Arkansas to shoot. So maybe there'll be some truth to that. But I can tell you last year, Musselman was optimistic about the three-point shooting throughout, and it never really got better. Yeah. The other side of that is they weren't just playing themselves in Europe. Obviously they were playing other teams and they struggled. So it wasn't just their own scheming that's maybe made it hard for themselves. But he's right that the fact that he said when he was talking about the three-point shooting that it's just something they're going to have to continue to work on. I don't think you give up on it. And I think you've got to figure out, and he's done such a great job of figuring out what works, even if it's been mid-January, because at that point you're still early in conference play. And if you're going to find any time to struggle, it's probably obviously sometime in the first half or middle of the season and not later. And he's, he gets an A+ for getting things figured out. And so even if the team's not going to be a good three-point shooting, like I said previously, they'll figure out what works, and I think they'll make it work. Now, we're going to talk about schedule here in a little bit. Not only the newcomers factor in, right, as being maybe a bigger hurdles in there, but for some of those reasons of not only 6 freshmen, but just having so many newcomers. But I think the schedule's more challenging from not only non-conference definitely is, but even the SEC slate is probably the most challenging they've had. So you combine it and you combine the youth factor and newcomers, there's a lot. I can understand why he keeps, sort of trying to temper expectations in a presser like that. I understand it, but the talent is absolutely there. I still don't back down from the fact that I think this is a Final Four type of roster and personnel makeup. Some of these other things that we just went through, we're not trying to be negative, but we can only really, if we're talking about what we saw in 30 minutes and what the coach is talking about, everything really came back to that newness and youth, discussion. And so I find that, like I said, interesting on many levels, Ty.
Yeah. Before we get into the schedule talk, we're going to do that next. Make sure you guys like this stream. And if you have any questions or comments, fire away. We will get to them here in a little bit. And make sure you share the content here and subscribe if you're new to Hogville Net YouTube, and maybe copy and paste this stream and send it to some family members and be like, hey, they're kind of killing it over here on YouTube. Hogville is, so you need to go check them out. And also go check out hogville.net for all the latest and greatest from the guys that cover all things Razorbacks. Otis, Kirk, Dudley Dawson, Kevin McPherson. All right. Scheduling. So we're still waiting on, and I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this late in the process. We're still waiting on one team to sign off.
Well,
what's going on with that?
Yeah, so they haven't released, the SEC. We've got the SEC. We kind of had it slow drip. We knew what the matchups were. Yeah. Then we knew what the dates were, and then we knew. Now we know what times those games are going to be, as well as that. For ESPN, they always package it as ESPN2 or U. So sometimes they make those decisions kind of based on where those teams are and how they want to maximize viewership later on. But at least we know it's national television designations with the ESPN family of networks. Arkansas has one CBS game. So we knew the SEC part of it, and that's set. We knew the Maui Invitational, that stuff got put out because they're partnered with ESPN. Now we know those matchups. It's tournament formats. We don't know exactly who Arkansas is going to play game 2. Game 3, we know they're going to start with Louisville. Then we also got the Big 12 SEC game at Baylor. That's actually in the middle of conference play, late January. So we've had some stuff come out. Now, most of the teams, Oklahoma and Tulsa, Arkansas has acknowledged that one. That's going to be an ESPN2 game, I believe, at noon on December 11th in Tulsa. Was a massacre last year. Hopefully Arkansas, if you're a Razorback fan, gets that tide turned. But most of the other non-conference games that we know about have either been leaked or reported by somebody else, or the team that Arkansas is playing has put their schedule out, and you find out that Arkansas is playing that team because it's on their schedule. So Arkansas hasn't released really, looking at it, they haven't released much. Most of it's coming from other places. And so when they do release it, I'm assuming they're going to, I don't want to assume anything. They released this exhibition game by itself yesterday. They've still got another exhibition game they can play. Obviously, there's a regular season game. We know 30 of them now, though. Troy was one that came out last week. That'll be on November 28th, by the way, which is right after they get back from Maui. So that's probably going to be, that's a Monday, I believe. So that should be it's a few days after they get back. And that's Maui's Thanksgiving weekend. Then they get back and they'll play Troy at Bud Walton Arena. So we know 30 of them. 18 will be on national television, Ty, when I look at what has come out in terms of that SEC schedule. So when we look at the Maui Invitational, 3 of those games will be in the ESPN family of networks, all 3. When you look at the Baylor game, again, on the road, SEC Big 12 Challenge, that's being televised by ESPN. It'll be on the big one. And so you've got those 4 games. I mentioned Oklahoma and the neutral site in Tulsa. That's going to be on, I think it's ESPN2. So already we know of 5 games in non-conference that'll be nationally televised. Then in league play, they've got the 1 game on CBS. That's against Kentucky at Bud Walton Arena. Regular season finale on March 4th. Then you've got a lot of games. I think the next, when I'm doing my math here, that's 1 + 5 is 6, 18. They've got 12 games then that are scheduled to be on the SEC network and league play, on ESPN, ESPN2, or ESPNU and league play, and then 5 games on SEC network. So having said all that, the national televised games, 18 out of the 30 games we know, that's maybe a high water mark for the program. I can't remember a season, even back in the Nolan days, when they had that many nationally televised games. I don't count SEC Network as a nationally televised game, even though it might be available for subscribers anywhere. I don't really count that, but I do count ESPN obviously and CBS. So, and we might see some of these matchups in non-conference getting some television picked up that can be considered, a national broadcast. We just don't know, maybe not, but maybe. But 18, that's a lot, man.
This is, looking at it too. I mean, it's the SEC. I think with the higher quality of coaches that have been brought in over the last several years, it's obviously brought the league up a couple of levels from where they were at. I've always said up until about a few years ago, I thought the SEC was a very mediocre basketball conference. Sometimes I thought they're at the bottom of the Power Five, but lately it's gotten better. Much better. And you look at Nate Oates at Alabama, and of course Muss in Arkansas, and what's going on with Tennessee, and so on and so forth, with all these coaching changes over the years. Looking at the schedule, though, it's pretty brutal. I mean, of course you got Kentucky twice. You get LSU twice. You start off, that's when you start off conference play on the road, December 28th on ESPN2/U. That'll be at their place. Of course, we know what's going on with their program. I still think that'll be a hostile environment, but yeah, this is, I'm looking at the schedule. I think it might actually be tougher than last year's. I want to get your thoughts on that. Just how would you compare this schedule to last year? I know it's still early. Teams are still trying to figure it out. It's a little bit different than looking at a football schedule and a basketball schedule, because sometimes, like Arkansas, you don't really know what you have until, January, late January. But what are your thoughts comparing kind of this schedule based on what we know and what we see versus last year?
Yeah, I think it's the toughest one they've had. Last year Arkansas had some tough games, but if you remember when they upset at that time #1 Auburn, home game. They beat Tennessee the first time when they played them, home game. Kentucky, home game. Only played Kentucky once, and so Arkansas had some tough road games, obviously, as well. LSU, I remember Musselman, that was the one game he was out, and Keith Smart took over, and LSU was highly regarded at that time. They were dealing with some injuries. Certainly Arkansas had one too at that time when we look at Kamani Johnson being out. But yeah, Arkansas wins that big road game. But yeah, this one's tougher. You've got home and away with both Kentucky and Alabama. By the way, Alabama's continues to recruit at a high level. Nate Oates' program now is considered typically year in and year out a team that's going to make some noise nationally. They'll be ranked preseason. So you're talking about home and away, and then you always have LSU, Missouri, and Texas A&M home and away. We'll see which of those schools. I'm going to just guess right now that maybe A&M is the best of those three. But Arkansas plays on the road. They played 4 of their first 6 conference games on the road, including at Auburn, another team that's going to be ranked. That always under Bruce Pearl is just, it's a nationally relevant program, and they continue to recruit that way. So you're going on the road there. You've got, you're back on the road again at Tennessee. I think Arkansas, maybe the 4th year in a row they've played on the road against Tennessee, even though they did have a home game with home and away last year. It may be the 4th season in a row where they're on the road against Tennessee, but that's going to happen. They'll get Florida at home. We'll see. The Gators haven't been as good as a program lately. But again, it's not only who you're playing and how often you play them in the league rotation, but when you're talking about the teams you expect to be, the most highly regarded outside of Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, and Alabama, those 4 teams, Arkansas has 6 games and only 2 at home out of that mix. And so you're on the road for 4 of them. You're on the road for Baylor. We know what Baylor's been in college basketball the last few years, and they recruit well, and continue to. So you always want to throw that in there when you say, well, here's what they have been, but they're expected to still be strong, and you're on the road for that game. You're away from home for the Maui Invitational. That's why I do think, Ty, going back to the exhibition game and what we had in Europe, when you've got that, again, a young team and all that inexperience together, I think it makes sense that you've had some games that, you don't get every year, once only 4 years overseas, but then you're going to get to, even in an exhibition game, go play a high major that's going to be highly regarded in Texas. So you start to give yourself chances to kind of, not be buffered by an easy non-conference schedule and easy exhibition games, and then you hit a wall. I think Arkansas will learn a lot about itself. Even if it loses that exhibition game, like I said, fans are not going to be happy about it, but so what? It doesn't even count. And you've got so much to play for, and we've seen the track record under Musselman. But once you're in league play, I really think at that point it becomes about injuries. How good are these teams really? Because when you're playing away from home, you're already at a disadvantage against a highly rated team if you're a highly rated team, and Arkansas is going to have a lot more of those this time around. Because when you look at the home schedule, outside of Kentucky and Alabama, we don't know any teams right now all season long that are coming to Bud Walton Arena. They're going to have any ranking or value when you start talking about how it even fits, plays in to the NCAA net rankings. Arkansas's net, just by virtue of playing so many away games and road games, is going to be strong. But you got to win some of those, and you got to position yourself for seeding later. And again, I think that's why Musselman's tempering expectations, because he knows this is the toughest schedule, both non-conference for sure, since he's been here, and in league play too. But also, we go back to the newcomers. I know I keep beating that drum. By the way, there were some positives in practice I didn't get around to. Everybody still looks long, athletic, and just, Arkansas in the past, Ty's had maybe one or two guys on the roster that had the kind of length and athleticism and size, maybe one or two guys. And now you're talking 5 or 6, maybe 7, that can make wow plays just because of their physicality and some of their physical and athletic attributes. And so, obviously, you want the high IQ. I think most of these guys have that too. That's why they were so highly rated. And again, we talked about some of the trouble areas. I think, turnovers will get ironed out. Trying to be positive here. We'll see about 3-point shooting. But man, this team's going to run. They're going to be great in transition. They're going to be a highlight reel. And if they're really sound defensively, we need to talk more about the defense. But if they're sound on that end, I think the other things fall into place. And again, this looks like on paper a Final Four caliber group.
Yeah, I certainly get that vibe too. Even though, again, and you have to take Europe with like the biggest grain of salt. But you got to remember those guys are older. Some of them are stars over there. Some of them, they're older. They've played the game for a long time, and you're going by European league and standards, and it's hard. So I had someone coming at me with that a few weeks ago, saying that, well, based on what we saw, even though they went 4-0, they're going to do terrible here because of the turnovers and the lack of 3-point game. And I said, well, pump your brakes. I think that if you're comparing what happened over there to what's going to happen here, I mean, I don't know. You've got a crystal ball, and I want it. I mean, if you think that's going to be the case and you turn out to be accurate. You also said, talking about the scheduling, and I hadn't even thought of this, with one non-conference game yet to be announced, it leaves the door open for Arkansas to schedule an in-state NCAA Division I opponent for the 3rd consecutive season. You think that happens? And if so, who would you like for that to be, or who do you think it might be?
Yeah, I've continued to put that in my articles when I get the schedule updates up, refreshed. I just leave that in there. We'll see. I'm at the point where I'm not sure that I believe that's going to happen. It's not going to be UCA. They played them in back-to-back seasons. They played Arkansas Little Rock as well during the regular season. We mentioned the exhibition game 3 seasons ago. So they played 2 different programs, UCA in back-to-back years, UALR once. Arkansas Pine Bluff, Arkansas State. Arkansas State's, we've seen their non-conference. Arkansas's not on it. That doesn't mean that something could change. I just don't think it is at this point. I don't know what the holdup is here. I'm going to say less than 50% on it being a team, an Arkansas-based team. I just don't think it's going to be probably less than 50%. But I want to be PC, so I'm going to leave it at that. I don't know where the percentage is. It's probably 0. But I won't shove it down to the floor. We'll leave it open for now. But I mean, who would I like to see him play? Of course, I'd like to see him play any in-state D1 team. Arkansas State would be cool, only because the last time those 2 teams played was in Nolan's 2nd year when they opened up in the NIT postseason NIT. Arkansas State came into Barnhill Arena and built a 20+ point lead, and Arkansas fought back, got the game to overtime, won it in overtime. And, it was thought at that time because Nolan had struggled. He had a losing record taking over for Eddie Sutton his first year. You make the NIT in the 2nd year and you lose to Arkansas State. Frank Broyles was, he was the guy that didn't want to play in-state schools to begin with. So there was a lot of talk that might have been the end of the Nolan era at Arkansas. That was such an important game. So would you like to see something? a game rekindled against that program. It gives us as media a lot of good talking points, even though that was back so long ago in '87. Gives you a lot of stuff to talk about because there's not a rivalry, right? There's not a history, but you do have fan bases within the state. Arkansas dominates that, we know that, but there are fan bases for these other programs, and they want a shot at the Razorbacks, and I think it's good for the state. I'm glad to see these games the last couple of years, and so I think it would be cool. So I'll name that, but Solomon Bozeman, new coach, head coach at Arkansas Pine Bluff. They're already doing some things, to ramp up their program, and who knows if maybe Arkansas will play them, either get them on the schedule or maybe an exhibition game still. We don't know where that's going, but I mean, either way, any of the 4 teams that we've talked about, I think it would be great for Arkansas to have them on the schedule every year.
I'm all about it, and I catch flack for that, but I'm all about it. I don't have a problem with keeping the money in the state. I don't have a problem with that, and even if you did lose to Arkansas State, okay, it's not going to change the dynamics of these two programs. Like, it's not going to change anybody's trajectory. Although if you lose to Arkansas State, there might be maybe there is something more deep there that we need to discuss if that were to happen in this multiverse matchup, that takes place elsewhere in another universe. But I'm all about it. I kind of wouldn't mind. And also because Arkansas State fans, I was talking to DJ Williams about this. I had him on a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about how mouthy Arkansas State fans are on Twitter. They're just so mouthy. It would be nice just to kind of, I don't know, beat the crap out of one of them teams just to get them to hush up for a little bit. Anything else on the schedules? Is there anything else that kind of maybe you wanted to focus in on a little bit more, talking about either the non-con games? Because again, you look at that Baylor matchup, the Big 12 SEC challenge, and going to be playing there in Waco. That's going to be 3 or 5 p.m. We don't have a definite time. Is there any other game here that you wanted to focus on for a second? Or
yeah, well, I said that Arkansas starts SEC play 4 out of 6 on the road, including at Auburn. Yeah. When they play Baylor, they do have 3 home games, I think, in a row, with that Baylor game in the somewhere in the middle there. So they'll have some home games in SEC play while dealing with that road game against Baylor. And then we talked about having Kentucky in the season finale on CBS at Bud Walton Arena, but just prior to that, you're on the road for back-to-back games against Bama and Tennessee, expected to be 2 of the top teams in the league. So those final 3 games might, with as tough as Arkansas' schedule is leading up to that, those final 3 games are probably going to have a lot to say about what Arkansas can do to sort of put a stamp on a national seed, because Arkansas will be projected at that point somewhere in the national seed. But those 3 games can shift in your favor a lot. When you're on the road and you lose close games, sometimes it doesn't hurt you in those things, in that standpoint, but you can help yourself. So if you can win 2 of those 3 or all 3, you're probably either solidifying a really high seed or you're moving up some going into the SEC tournament. And so I think you want to keep an eye on that part of the season. Obviously, Baylor, that's just a showcase game. I mean, it's you want to go on the road and if you can add that to your resume as a win, great. If you lose that game, it doesn't hurt you. And I like the bravado and the scheduling. Of course, the coaching staff doesn't have the TV and how these teams are viewed in their own leagues are what establish these matchups. But when you go to when you start talking Maui, you start talking getting away from home to play OU like they did last year, and then you see what's going on with the SEC schedule. I think this is the most aggressive Arkansas staff has been in their scheduling since Musselman's been here, and I think it's a good thing. The way they did it before, it wasn't as strong in non-conference when we go back to that, but at the same time, things worked out, and so we're not going to second guess how they put those together. And I'm certainly not going to second guess when they put together a strong non-conference schedule, which is what I think they've done. I think, it's kind of like you talk so much about a full body of a schedule, and obviously you're going to have to not lose a lot, but Arkansas, might lose some games that, when we look at their record after non-conference, you're going, well, usually we think we're going to be only 1 loss, maybe 2. They might lose 3. They might not, but they could lose 3 non-conference games this time around. It's a tougher schedule. That doesn't necessarily mean that they can't still be in contention for a high seed. And we know what they do in SEC play is going to have a lot to say. But I still think those last 3 regular season games are going to really mean a lot for this team. All games matter, but those 3, because they're so big and it's just kind of a crescendo into the SEC tournament, I think are going to be huge. And we got a little more time here, Ty. I want to talk some pro hoop Hogs because we're about to get basketball on the pro level underway here. They're going to start playing games a month, even though they're not regular season, they start this weekend.
Yeah, well, before we do that really quick, I did have someone ask about, we had a recruiting question, when we talked.
Oh, we skipped recruiting, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We'll do that really quick. Someone wanted to know, Zachary Beeler wanted to know, how's Kevin feeling about Ron Holland? Obviously, Ron Holland, I was going to ask you about Bay Fall. Just kind of where do you think they're at with these two?
Yeah, I think they're in good shape. I do. Ron has taken all 4 of his official visits. He's still considering the G League Ignite. I don't know how seriously on the pro part of it. And he and his mom have been really busy on Twitter in the last week or so. Even talking about maybe taking some unofficial visits. There's been talk about maybe he'll be up for the Alabama game. That's a possibility. A few days ago, and I'm gonna reach back out and get an update. A few days ago, I was told 99.9% chance that it doesn't happen. But the old, Dumb and Dumber line. So you're saying there's a chance that leaves open and these things change quickly. And so we'll see. I'm not going to be surprised if Ron Holland doesn't make it up for that game on an unofficial. And then we'll see, there's some thought that he may make a decision, make a commitment and sign early. I've heard other talk that he might make a decision, commit and not sign early. And then I've heard some other folks that are close to the situation that say, man, I wouldn't be surprised if he just waits. So, I think Arkansas is in great shape. There are some people that think it's a done deal. I'm not quite there yet. But when I talk to different folks who know him, it's always 2 names, Arkansas and some other team. And over time, that changes, right? It's Arkansas and this team, then it's Arkansas and this team. But Arkansas is always in there. So I don't know if they're just doing me, thinking they're doing me a favor by making sure they mention Arkansas. I don't think so. Because usually some of these sources down in Dallas-Fort Worth especially tell me if they don't think Arkansas is even in it. So Arkansas has kind of been the consistent there. As far as Bay Fall, Asani Diop, they're on their official visitor. They're supposed to be at Seton Hall today and with coming in this weekend for an official visit. So they will be on campus this weekend. There'll be some other folks come in, but they'll be on an official visit. We talked about last year that unofficial visit during the Kentucky game when Arkansas won at Bud Walton Arena. They hung around, met with the coaching staff. I heard that went really well. I still think Arkansas is the leader, by the way, for Bay Fall and Asani Diop. That's my belief. They visited Rutgers earlier in September. They canceled a visit the following weekend to Texas. And so, I don't have 100% confirmation that they've arrived at Seton Hall yet. Would not shock me if they didn't go, because that's a real quick turnaround. They're supposed to arrive in Fayetteville sometime tomorrow afternoon. The official visit, I think, starts on Friday, but they're supposed to arrive late afternoon, early evening in Northwest Arkansas on Thursday. So we'll see if they're going to do that quick of a turnaround and actually get to Seton Hall where it's been planned. But, we mentioned these guys, 6'11" forward center, Bay Fall, 5-star, national top 15 guy. I think Rivals has him as high as number 11. Asani Diop, ESPN has him in the top 60, high-level 4-star, 6'10". They complement each other. When I talked to Greg Willis, their guardian and coach, just recently said, he's noticed that Bay's really improved his face-up game and stepping out a little bit. He's been more the interior player. Asani's got some ball skill and craft out on the perimeter for a 6'10" guy. So they do complement each other. Sounds like they're both moving the needle in terms of development. And then they return. By the way, they're going to be in Arkansas in November on a Saturday for a showcase at Fort Smith Northside High School, the Grizzlies Arena. There's going to be 10 teams, 5 games that day. So it's not a tournament, it's a showcase, but they will be in town to play. So they'll be back in Arkansas. They're coming in for this visit, and then they'll be back the following month in November. Wouldn't it be interesting if they're committed to the Razorbacks by then, and then Arkansas fans could go out and watch them? But those are really the headlines right now in recruiting, other than Little Rock Central's Keon Boateng, 6'5", pushing 6'6" wing, just got elevated to 5-star status last week, class of 2024. Arkansas has been recruiting him recently down, including Eric Musselman, to watch him practice. But Rivals has bumped him up 41 spots to number 13 in the country, a 5-star. On3, which is a new national recruiting service, fairly new, has him at number 12 nationally. So you've got more than one of these recruiting services really thinking highly of Kane or Boateng. He and Layden Blocker, Arkansas's class of 2023 loan commitment, also a 5-star in the composite rankings. They'll be at Team USA Basketball Junior National Training Camp October 7th through 10th. So we're just catching you up on some recruiting stuff. And before we jump over here, I want to hit some Pro Hog, Hoop Hog stuff because it's coming up fast.
Yeah, well, let's get started. Let's do it. What do you have? What do you have for us on the NBA front for these former Hogs?
Well, they just had media days this past weekend, trickling into early this week, and they start training camp. This stuff goes fast in the NBA. The preseason games are already starting. The Golden State Warriors have arrived in Tokyo, so there's going to be a preseason game starting Friday night. Well, I guess it's Friday morning, actually, at 5 a.m. our time. But the Warriors are playing Daniel Gafford and the Washington Wizards. So you got Moses Moody and the Warriors, Daniel Gafford, Wizards, preseason game on Friday at 5 a.m. Those two teams will play each other again at midnight, I guess Saturday night / Sunday morning. So, a little over 24 hours later, they'll play again. You've got Bobby Portis and the Milwaukee Bucks taking on Memphis on Saturday at 7 o'clock. And that all these games will be televised on NBA TV, by the way. So fans that have that as part of their cable package or satellite package will be able to watch these guys already in preseason action, assuming they're all these former Hogs are either healthy or ready to go. Sometimes preseason can be funny. You don't always know who's going to play or how much they'll play. But some of these younger players, like a Moses Moody, even Daniel Gafford and Bobby Portis being a veteran, we'll see how much run they actually get in the preseason. But I expect we'll see these guys. And, Isaiah Joe with Philadelphia 76ers, Patrick Beverly now with the Lakers. And you're going to have two former Hogs when the actual season starts. Opening day is October 18th, Ty. And you're going to have Isaiah Joe and the Sixers taking on the Celtics, doubleheader on TNT. And later that night, it's ring night for Golden State and Moses Moody when they take on the Lakers and Patrick Beverly. So you get a lot of Razorback flavor throughout the season on some of the biggest days, marquee game days like opening day, Christmas day. I think 5 former Hogs are playing in that lineup of games. There's like a 5 games in a row on national television. And I think at least 4 or 5 Hogs are playing on that day. So some of the bigger game days throughout the season are going to feature a lot of Razorbacks. What that tells you is pro Hogs are on some really good teams that are highly marketable when you start talking about the national TV picture in the NBA.
And that can only help with recruiting. I mean, let's be real. That guy plays for Golden State. That guy plays for so-and-so.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you've got back-to-back seasons with Razorbacks being on NBA title teams. Moses Moody last year, Bobby Portis the year before. Real quick, Stanley Moody has been signed to Detroit's training camp roster. He was on an Exhibit 10 deal and had a really good summer league with Detroit, and now he's on their training camp roster. We'll see. Does he get some run in the preseason? And we'll see how that plays out for him. But a great opportunity for Stanley Moody.
So there you have it. Kevin McPherson gets us all caught up, and we do it in 1 hour. We do appreciate each and every one of you guys that were able to come through. Make sure you like, share, subscribe to the content. Go to hogville.net for all the latest and greatest from the greatest. Kevin McPherson, Dudley Dawson, Otis Kirk. I throw their names out here a lot, but I do that because they're, well, not just because I work with them, but because they do a damn good job.
Yeah, but you got the names. I see our names, first and last names on here.
Yeah, well, see, like I was telling you, the banner that I have doesn't look. See how it cuts off your name?
You took the banner down.
I'm just not an aesthetics guy, Kevin. I'm not. I don't know. StreamYard is still fairly new to me. I haven't started doing StreamYard till I came over here to Hogville. I've never used it, so I'm kind of learning on the fly. But
well, I tell you what, I like the banner more than I may not. We can roll with the banner, and we can,
Yeah, I like that though, because we have our sponsor right there. Well, right there. Right there's our sponsor. So
right.
Yeah, and a shout out too, by the way, to Direct Service Overhead, Travis Ford and the boys. If you have any questions, if you need some work done in your garage, hey, go hit them up. I've got their number here. Hang on just a second. Direct Service Overhead. They operate out of all over the state of Arkansas. If you need any work done, give them a call today at 501-244-3667. Again, that's 501-244-3667. They offer free estimates, quality parts, affordable outcomes, better than best results, by the way. So yeah, a lot of the old school people who've been with me since Pig Trail Network days or Tuss Talk days know all about direct service overhead. They do a great job. A lot of good reviews. Kevin, I do appreciate you, my man. I'm going to run, go grab some lunch, and then pick my kids up from school. But this was awesome, and I'm sure the audience, Hog fans, got a lot here today. We're caught up on basketball, and I'm looking forward to doing some more of this.
Feel free with your kiddos to hit the high points, what we talked about today, or force them to watch this. There's no education to like a good basketball education or figuring out what, that it's not very helpful at all, but at least you get something out of it.
Nothing wrong with a little hog
listen, I appreciate you guys. For 2 weeks now, I've been battling these allergies. I've been coughing during segments. So today I figured out if I drink a lot of water, I probably won't cough. The scratchy throat, man, I hope it didn't.
Well,
I hope it wasn't like nails on a chalkboard for you.
No, you're fine. It's amazing what only drinking water will do for you. My wife tells me that from time to time, and I'm sitting here drinking a Mountain Dew. So hopefully she's not watching and I'm not in any trouble. All right, we're gonna end it here. Thank you guys so much. Remember, like, share, subscribe. Thank you to Kevin McPherson for taking a little time out of his day, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Ty.
Thank you.